everyone, and welcome back to the Social Audio Think Tank. Josh here from Melbourne, Australia. Today's episode is called the Warhamm-isode. So that might sound a little bit funny, but it will make more sense in a minute. So I'm here with my co-host, Jackson. How you going, Jackson?
I'm going good, thanks.
That's the Jackson from Oz Podcast. So just to get our Twitters out of the way early, because I'm getting a little bit sick of doing that right at the end. It feels a bit lame to sign off with a Twitter. Mine's at Joshua C. Liston.
And I'm at Oz Podcasts.
So yeah, for Jackson, at Oz Podcast. So the reason why we're calling today Warhamm-isode is because in our last episode, which was the Trivia-isode, we talked about a live trivia night that we hosted for podcasters and podcast fans. It was called Pod versus Pod, so we had two different teams. If you missed the last episode, basically, that's the story. We basically hosted an event which was based around trivia. It was more towards what podcast listeners might be into, so sport, comedy, pop culture, and just general nerdy stuff. And yeah, it wasn't particularly successful. And then after, I thought while we were recording that episode, wow, there's something I really want to say, and it's from my experience booking other types of events in the past. And I didn't really get to it, and I forgot about it. And then Jackson mentioned something off air that was really, really interesting about a method of putting on a live podcast event that is actually probably going to be very successful and or, you know, has the seeds of success. And it's about a subject that's non-business related, which our show's about. It's a pretty creative, nerdy kind of subject. So did you want to explain maybe why we've called today the Warhamm-isode, Jackson, and how that applies to live podcasting?
Sure. Well, we were talking about the pricing of tickets and whether we gave our tickets away for free. Should we have charged a small amount, $5, maybe $10? But then I was discussing that I know of another podcast that's had or is having an event recently. I can't tell you the dates. I wouldn't know. Where they're a very niche podcast. They're a Warhammer podcast,
which is a fantasy board game type.
It's a tabletop sort of war game thing with little models that like this. They paint the models.
It's a big universe.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want this to sound like I'm insulting them, but it is the height of geekery.
Yeah, I think they wear that mantle pretty proudly, though.
So they have that their Warhammer podcast, and they were hosting an event recently, and I couldn't tell you the format of the event either. I should have done my research, but they were hosting a podcast event, and I heard that they were selling their tickets for around $60 a piece. That is
huge.
Yes.
And I just want to say one thing. If it sounds like we don't really know what we're talking about right at the moment, this is a spur-of-the-moment episode, so no prep of any kind whatsoever. So, yeah, the details probably aren't as important as maybe what you finished up with there, that if you have an incredibly engaged subject matter and you only want to appeal to just those people, and it's something maybe where people are used to coming together anyway, which Warhammer has that methodology to how the game is played and how the community works, that they're used to actually coming together physically and doing something together at the height of nerdery, as we mentioned. But once again, they wear that with pride, just like I do for some of the sci-fi shows that I love. I think that the high-priced ticket thing negates a little bit of what you mentioned in the last episode, and that's going to be probably my only point for today, that you said maybe we should have charged $5. Well, as I said to Jackson during the pre-chat that we had quickly just before recording this, I wouldn't even leave the house for $5. Like, $5 isn't enough to make me want to either spend $10 on a train, return, $30 or $40 on a cab, or take a bus, which might take 30 detours and take forever to get there.
Yeah.
I don't think that having a costed ticket can really get someone out of the house in the modern world unless it really was a large financial outlay.
Yeah.
I think things either have to be free or they have to actually have a high ticket value to justify someone leaving the house. Because if I spent $5 on something and I'm umming and ahhing about it on the day, I'm not going to think, oh, well, I spent $5 on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas if you spend $60, if you're an average person, that could be, between 2 and 3 hours of your working wage or whatever you happen to be doing to make money. That's a pretty big outlay. Do you agree with me there that maybe even setting a low price wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever?
Yeah, this is sort of a bit of uncharted territory for me. I've never really thought about this stuff before hosting the event. So, but yeah, you're right. It's $5. I can take it or leave it, really. It's not going to, if I don't want to go, $5 isn't going to make me go.
No, that's it. And it almost seems like if I was to go look at an event and they price themselves at $5, I would be thinking, oh, why is it $5?
Yeah.
It's either should be worth a lot more, or why don't they just make it free? It's like $5 is a little bit nitpicky. And it's like it's one of those price points where it doesn't infer professional value, but it is probably just enough for someone to think, oh, I could hire something off iTunes or, you know, Netflix or whatever you happen to be doing at home, or you could, go buy half an album on iTunes, or there's other things you can do with $5 that don't involve leaving the house. So, I just think that maybe and obviously this is an on-the-fly episode, but as a takeaway, I think if your subject matter is something where people come together in a communal nature, what I said in the last episode about maybe it can't work having a live event would be negated by the passion of the individual community, as long as there is an element where those people are used to coming together. Yeah. Like if you do a Star Trek, if you're doing a Star Trek-based podcast and you have some level of notoriety, I'm sure an event would absolutely kill. But if you wanted to bring together people from Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate Universe, all of those particular shows, those people just don't want to mesh.
Yeah.
Or they're not going to mesh that well in the if they want to hang out with each other, they'll go to some big event somewhere. Or if you've got, just take sports teams for the time being, and the Melbourne Tigers, which are now the Melbourne United for some crazy, crazy reason, which is horrible for any Australian basketball fans. It's just really insulting. If you're a Melbourne Tigers fan club, people are used to going to games. They're used to getting together physically or going to fan events or whatever, or signings or whatever. But if you wanted to bring together, all of the NBL fans for Melbourne, when they don't really have anything to do with each other or want anything to do with each other really, I think you'd have more success with one team as opposed to having a whole league. I don't know if you agree with me there, but I just think, because the Warhammer is a perfect example, like I can't think of anything something that really doesn't, give any financial reward or anything that people are more passionate about. Like, yeah, I've got mates that, spend all of their time and money on painting little figurines and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just pretty crazy and engaged. So I don't know if I even made a point there, but I think what you've said, and I think the key to it is setting that high price value that it really is going to ward off even the most, because that community is not going to want to be around people that are casually checking out Warhammer.
Yeah.
Or walking in thinking, oh, what is this? Like, what am I like those people that came to our last event, there was 3 or 4 right at the start that didn't even know what they were in.
Yeah.
And then when they worked out it was about podcasting, they left pretty quickly.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, yeah, maybe what you've told me has probably changed my mind a little bit about what I said in the last episode. But I will stick to my guns on, if you're trying to bring a huge community of people that don't really have a commonality and aren't used to going out and hanging out together, like a country music fan and a Metallica fan, and you want to bring those two groups together in a podcast, it's probably not going to work in the live environment. So is there anything else you had to say about the Warhammer thing? How did you feel when your friend first said, obviously the Warhammer thing is take it or leave it, whether you're interested or not, but how did you feel about how they were pricing their tickets and what was their particular vibe? Were they selling? Were they excited about the event itself?
Well, yeah, the biggest revelation for me was that they had such a niche market and they were doing so well in that they would even consider that they were going to sell, and they did sell, and they did well. And it blew my mind that I'm slogging away in doing, a generic movie review podcast and getting not much, and they've picked this little niche, and just by that sounds pretty harsh. I'm not going to say just because they have that niche that they're doing well, but they have such a dedicated following in their genre. It's amazing. It was sort of a world I didn't really know about.
I think the whole going super niche thing is maybe a topic for another another episode of Social Audio Think Tank, because I have some feelings about that, and they're probably a little bit contrarian to what a lot of people say. And the Warhammer thing, you'll need to remind me when it comes to that in the future, because that's a good example that will probably, hopefully, reinforce my point when that particular episode comes down the pipe. So I'll just go through the tech quickly. We're using Sennheiser MD421s into a Soundcraft EFX 12 desk, a M Audio Fast Track Pro interface into a Mac, and that is recording on Logic. And once again, we have been battling the squirrely power from Southern FM Studios today. So, we'll try and get rid of as much of that funny noise as possible. So is there anything else you wanted to say, Jackson?
No, that's all from me.
Cool. So go check out the Warhammer, just in general, and see what we're talking about.
Well, I'll give a shout out to the podcast who ran that event, which was the Dwellers Below, I believe it is. So check out the Dwellers Below if you're into Warhammer.
Cool. Okay. See you later, Jackson.
See you later, Josh.
We were just the warriors. We were just the warriors, home and away, fighting for a piece of you. Just a little moment slipping away.
Listen to Australian podcasts. ozpodcasts.com.au